All right. Welcome to Huapahua, a virtual New World Symposium hosted by the Barony of Marinus in Atlantia. Our next class will be Beading 101, taught by Lord Rojhon. My name is Amanda, and I'll be your teaching assistant for this class. This class will be recorded and uploaded to the Barony of Marinus YouTube channel. If you do not wish for your image to be recorded, please turn off your camera now. In order to provide a best experience for all students, please mute your microphones unless asked to unmute. By joining this class, we've agreed to respect the Society's bullying and harassment policy, as well as the Marinus inclusivity policy. If you need a refresher, they're in the chat box. I have also posted a attendance poll, which will help us present more of these things if you'd answer that for us, okay? And now I'm gonna mute myself.
All right, hello, Tanse. Welcome to Beading 101. I am Lord Rojhon The Wanderer. I hail from the Barony of the Cleflands in the Mid-Realm. I am from the Naheo people from Fox Lake Reservation in Canada. And this is Beading 101. So what you're gonna need is you're gonna need some needles. These are specifically beading needles, 10 through 12 gauge. But you can use a regular sewing needle, which I have also used in the past. You will obviously need thread. I have a heavy duty white sewing thread, the same that I use for my machine. And you will need, I like to use an embroidery hoop to help hold the fabric in place. Just some basic fabric. I have some white fabric here that I've already stretched out. You will also need, I use a little tiny bowl that I've already got beads in it, so I'm trying not to like tilt it too much. But I put my beads in the bowl so that it helps me pick them up on my needle. You will also need beads. This is my travel-sized collection. That should tell you all a lot. These are all 10 gauge beads that I am using. You can get your beads anywhere. You can get them from Michael's, you can get them from Hobby Lobby, you can get them from your local craft store. If you are someone who likes to drop money, you can go to Etsy. You can support actual indigenous bead makers and buy specifically from them. They are a little more expensive than your average like plastic bead that you'll get at a craft store because they're made out of either glass or porcupine quills or shell beads. They're a little more delicate. So I would recommend while you are learning beadwork that you just go ahead and buy a bulk beading pack from Michael's or Joann's or your favorite preferred craft store. But then again, I am a broke college student who would rather spend $20 to learn before spending $100. So that's my personal opinion, but I also highly recommend, if you can afford it, looking after indigenous businesses. So I've got a piece right here that I'm working on. These are little blackberries that I have already made. And I will show you how to make another blackberry. And then I'll teach you how to bead the vines. So the first step is to set up your needle. Once you have threaded it, you can pick a placement. Let's do about here. Pull your needle through. Once that is set, I have some black beads, which I'm going to open. I'm going to pour into my bowl. Okay. And I'm gonna apparently drop the lid. Oh, this is why I brought the carrier, so they can stay upright until I feel like getting that. So I'm gonna pick up my needle and my little bowl. And I'm just gonna go ahead and stab a couple of those on. Now I use longer skinny needles, so I like to get about half a needle's worth of beads on there, whatever that is. I don't really count them. Run them down and pinch, and then I go back for another half a needle's worth. I recommend for those just starting out, start with just the half a needle's worth instead of going for a double count. Because once I have my second half loaded up, and slid down to meet, we make our spiral. So I put my thumb, put my thumb down on top of my beads to hold it in place. And then I make a spiral and I wrap the beads around that center strand. And it can take a minute to get it as tight as you want or as circular as you like. And then I'm going to go ahead and poke the needle through. And pull it tight. And then I'm going to come up through the center and catch that strand. Just by poking directly underneath it. So this is a really loose spiral that I've made. I can go back and fill that in with more beads, which is actually what I'm going to do. Or you can kind of, before you catch it, you can twist it in tighter a little bit on itself. Then you're going to go back through one of your beads and poke it into the fabric. I'm going to come up through the other side, catch a bead, poke it back through the fabric. And this is just securing those in place. And you're going to go ahead and go all the way around. Catching on all sides to make sure that your beads lie mostly flat. Yes, so I'm couching it down through the bead. I'm also every third bead running a stitch directly across the original stitch. So directly through the line of beads previously. So it looks like that. And the point of putting it through, so I purposely made a mistake here. You can see on this one, I didn't run it through the beads, so you can see the thread. And so on the others, running it through the beads hides the thread. That's also how you can add it on. So if you decide that this blackberry here is just a little too small, you can take your needle and come up through the center. And then slide it through. It's hard to do this in reverse. These two little beads here. And then I can add on. And it creates a seamless line. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more of these black beads on here. And follow the spiral along the edge of the beads. And then slip it through your beads and back down into your fabric. And from there, come up and follow the same process. Catch your beads, tack them down. Yes, the next color that I'll be using should be a little more visible. You
need to adjust the lamp or anything?
No, I don't think it's the light. I think it's just that it's dark beads.
Okay.
Oh shoot, I forgot to bring scissors with me.
I can go get some.
Thank you. So I've got my blackberries. The next step should be a little more visible. So I poke my needle through. And I've got these really pretty green beads here. Should be, thanks, hon. A little more visible. So we're going to once again take about a half a needle's worth. And we're going to make our stem. So we've got our line. These little beads. We're going to go ahead doing this upside down. Hold on. And catch one of these beads here and poke it down. And this is creating our stem. So you'll see a lot of floral designs. You'll also see a lot of vegetative designs, a lot of berries, a lot of flowers in beadworks. It's quite common to see the things of the earth. Is this easier to see? You just tack that down. Now, I'm about to run out of thread. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this one off. And I just poke the needle ever so gently through the bottom of the fabric, pull it through, make a little loop, catch that loop, and then I come around and I tie a knot. Let's go ahead and double knot that one, just to be on the safe side. There we go, nice and tight. I have to leave just a little bit of a tail on there just so I can go back and glue them down at the end. When I finish a design and I'm ready to turn it into an applique, I'll go back and I'll run some Mod Podge or some glue over the back of my ends just to kind of keep them all down and together. And then if I'm doing something like a hairpin, I'll use a leather backing. And then I'll use some glue and I'll put that on the leather backing before I stitch it, just to add some extra protection there. Oh, come on. The hardest part, threading the needle. Now, if I had planned ahead, like I should have, I would have had a second needle threaded. Come on. My God, I'm blind. Does anyone have any questions while I fight this needle? There we go. Oh, come on, you.
Are you bringing the needle to the thread or the thread to the needle?
Well, first I bring them both to my eyes.
I'm in. I'm in.
I can try to find a needle threader, but it'll take me a minute.
And then there you go. I like to bring the needle to the thread. It is easier for me to move the needle.
Same.
But I first have to be able to see them. So I know some people like to do like great big long lengths of thread, which is usually if I'm hand stitching something, that is my impulse to get a huge length of thread. I find for beading, you usually want about like a forearm's length or less. Smaller segments of thread are less likely to get tangled, especially for those who are beginners at beadwork. You know, my first attempt at beading, I went with the wrong gut impulse of a longer length of thread means I have to thread it less. And I spent hours just getting tangled in thread. So I recommend smaller lengths, especially while you're getting started and you're learning how to adjust your thread and your beads and what feels best for you. There are dozens of beading styles. If you go on YouTube and you look up beading tutorials for different styles, different patterns, you're going to find 1,000 different ways to bead. There's a lot of people that do like a 2-needle system, 1 needle for the beads, 1 needle for tacking them down. I tried that. I always stab myself with a needle I'm not using. And so to keep the bloodletting out of the craft, I've gone with the one needle system. So because I'm adding the new needle in, I go up through one of the beads that I've already beaded. I always double my thread. I always fold it in half and tie the two ends together. It's a little more secure. If one strand breaks, it means all of your beads don't fall off and you have to start over. I like to add that little extra security. And you can bead anything. You can bead shoes, you can bead hair ties, you can bead clips, you can bead outfits. I am currently engaged, and I am doing a lot of effort trying to talk my family out of making full beaded wedding outfits for us, because those can weigh a lot. And I think they're beautiful and it's a very sweet offer. But I think weddings will go a lot better if neither of us end up on the ground.
Generally.
But you can bead anything, beaded lanyards, beaded keychains. I've seen people like bead dog leashes and collars. For pets.
You forget that I'm a proud dog dad.
I will not bead your dog a collar because she will eat it. Let's be honest.
She'll just lick it a lot.
She'll eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've come up and I have caught it. And now I'm going to kind of fuss it in the direction. It's a technical word, right? Fuss it in the direction I want it to go. Yeah, that's about there. Ooh, stabbed myself. Well, it's a project now. And don't worry about being perfect, especially if you're learning. One of the most useful teachings I have found is the teaching of imperfection. The only thing that is perfect is the creator. And as we are not creator, we will never be perfect, so don't try. A lot of people will leave imperfections intentionally in their work. I like to let my screw-ups happen organically.
Agree. But also at the same time, are there any mistakes or not mistakes, but things that you did as a beginning beater that as you got more experience, you're like, oh, there's a better or easier way to do this?
Yes. So I started in the 2-needle camp of I should have one needle to bead with and one needle to come back and tack things down. For me, it's easier just to do it all with one needle. I use a little bit more thread, it takes a little bit more time. But I'm stabbing myself less frequently. Some people will directly bead leather. That takes a lot of hand strength to get a small enough needle that both fits your beads, your small bead gauges, but has enough oomph to puncture leather, depending on how it's been previously treated. But it can take some oomph. So I bead on fabric and then add that fabric to a leather backing if I want a leather backing. I know people that put beadwork on like their tennis shoes. And if you're gonna do like a beaded tennis shoe, I strongly recommend getting like a soft shoe, like a Converse, and not something, something with like a mesh or like a really soft fabric, and not like a hard leather shoe. But to each their own. I've also found that if I'm beading something spherical, like if I'm beading a lanyard, to always wrap your needle a few times around the lanyard. So if I'm beading, like if I was going to bead one of these ribbons, I would wrap the thread around it a few times before I start beading and poke it through once. Because I found that with the movement of something like a lanyard, if you're doing like a beaded lanyard or a beaded keychain, it can cause the beads to shift. And if you have that extra backing, it means they're not all going to slide down. I also found that using a little bowl really helps with your beads. There are people who will bead directly out of like these kind of tubes, or will just dump them all on their table. Cleanup is a disaster. Don't submit to the crafter math. Get yourself a little saucer from like the Goodwill. And put your beads in that. Also get yourself a funnel, like a small one, to help put your beads back. Avoid bead soup, which is, there's people that'll put all the little tiny bits of colors and things that are left over from a project in like a Ziploc bag. You're never getting those separated. Never. You will never separate those out again. If you go, oh, I want that color for whatever, it's over. You're never getting them separated ever again. They will never not be just an amalgamation of forgotten beads. So get yourself a tiny funnel. And find little itsy bitsy tiny projects you can do to use up the last of them. Or remember the names of every color ever. I have a Google Doc full of all of the different colors and if I liked them or not. So I know which ones to buy and where they came from. So I have color matching so that if I need more for a big project, I don't have to try and bring like my tiny Ziploc bag to the craft store. I'm like, is this a match? Is this a match? Is this a match? Just write it down. Keep it on your phone, keep it on your computer, keep it somewhere that it's not going to easily get lost. So those are some of my personal bits of advice. And also another really good advice is both good SCA advice and good beading advice. Start your projects at least 6 months before the due date. If you know that in December, you're gonna wanna wear some fancy beadwork to court, start now. Do not start your project like, oh, I have an event Friday and it's Monday afternoon. I guess I should start this now. Look, I have started things the night before. I found out on a Friday afternoon I was getting called into court on a Saturday evening. I have been that person. I have hated it every moment because you are panicking and you are panic sewing at the event because you want to be a fancy person. So just start in advance. And if there's something that you're like, this would be nice to have in the future, do it now. Start it now, because you're going to put it down, you're going to walk away, you're going to forget about it, and then you'll come back to it and it'll already be half done. Just especially with things like beadwork or like really fancy garb, things that take time that you have to do by hand. Start now. If you know that like you want to go to Penzic 49 in 2022 or 2026, hopefully it's not that far down the road, but you never know. If you know that you want to wear like some fancy beadwork for a party there, then start now. Future you will thank you.
Yep. I like learn that lesson every time I do a project and then immediately forget it and have to learn it again. It's a cycle. It's bad.
You know, this piece of beadwork is something I hope to have finished in the next 8 to 10 months. I could just sit here for like nothing but an hour and just knock it out. It's a small thing. I could do that. I know myself too well. I'm telling on myself. I know myself too well. And I know that when my class is over, I will put this down and it will cease to exist.
Yeah.
Because I think
in general, how long do you find, like both when you were starting out and now that you have experience, how long a small to medium sized project takes?
It really depends on how disciplined you are feeling. If you are someone with an amazing set of will that can sit down and devote like 15 to 30 minutes a day for a project, you could probably get something like this done in maybe 2 hours. I mean, the hardest part for me is always like picking the colors and the pattern I want to do, but this is pretty simple. You could do this in maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm going to add more on to this. I'm going to fill the loop. The goal is to fill the loop. Glaring at my craft gremlin here off camera. Are you gonna fill the loop? I'm gonna try.
Do you typically freehand, or do you ever like draw it out ahead of time?
There are lots of people that draw it out. Every time I have tried to draw it out, I have ended up ripping it out because it doesn't look the way I drew it on the fabric and in my head. So I freehand all of my beadwork. Everything is a free-formed idea. And sometimes the idea changes halfway. Like this was going to be a single blackberry with a stem and some flower vines, and now it's turned into a small group with a vine, and it will continue to grow and shift as I create the piece. And that's okay. I freehand, it's how I work, but if you're someone that works really well with like a predefined pattern, by all means, draw it. There are lots of, I have cousins who are professional beaders that draw out all of their designs in advance, and they draw them with the different color markers, what color goes where, and that works really, really well for them. I just get frustrated with it.
I imagine they often make things in pairs, and so that's probably part of that too, right?
Yeah,
you're making two exactly the same kind of
Yes.
Requires a little more.
If you're making like a set of earrings, I highly recommend, you know, having like a plan in place. Or if you're someone like, I also make earrings, and I do them planless, but I count once I finish the one earring, I count every single bead. So I know I have the exact number for the next set.
And you said that these are usually organic, like flowers.
There's a lot of flowers, there's a lot of berries, there's a lot of like butterflies or animals. But you also see in modern beading a lot of like superheroes, pop culture characters. There's
Baby Yoda.
There's people that bring beadwork into cosplay, which was so cool to see. I saw a Captain America that was done by a member of the Dene Nation.
I think I've seen that one.
And they had a full set of regalia, and they had the Captain America symbol done in beadwork on the front of their cosplay, and it's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Lot of work. If you're doing something like that, it has to be like precise, because fandom people are a little bit particular. You know, if you're gonna go that extra mile, then you might want to draw that out. But there's beadwork of everything. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've seen beadwork of the turtles. I've seen Disney princess beadwork. I've seen animal beadwork. I've seen like little foxes, little beavers. You know, I've seen lettering beadwork. You know, like beaded monograms. Beaded flowers. What's that called? Paisley. The little like curly Q designs. I've even seen people take like tapestry style, like screen printed posters and things, or like t-shirts, and then bead over those designs. I know, so if we look at Magda's background there with their lovely tapestry, there are people that would take that and bead that.
That's amazing.
And turn that full design into beadwork.
That's intense.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can be as much or as little work as you yourself are willing to put into it. There are a lot of people who commission beadwork, either through pay or through barter.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And beadwork, if you are buying someone's beadwork, expect to drop at least $50 to $100.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're taking hours of work. But something that always fascinates me is when people show up to powwow and they see these beautiful like beaded hairpins that people are selling. They're like, "Give you $10 for it," and they're like, "It's $200."
Oh, yeah.
Can you accept 10? No, I can accept 200. I 6 months on this.
That's a problem with a lot of handicrafts, sadly. you have a favorite motif?
Ooh. It's a really good question. I think
Había olvidado que hoy era el primer congreso del SCA del Nuevo Mundo.
I'm sorry, we didn't understand that. Oh, didn't be meant to be on mute.
Just to say, this is from Russian, Imperial era Russian bag.
yes, that's a beautiful one. Yeah. I think my favorite beaded motif. Ooh. I think the coolest one, it's way out of period. It is modern beadwork that I have seen that I really, really loved. Our last, the last powwow I went to was 3 years ago. That's sad. But it was the last powwow I went to, and there was a young woman who on the back of her jingle dress had a full back piece of a butterfly starting from the egg, hatching into the caterpillar, crawling up, eating leaves, crawling up a large tree, turning into a chrysalis, and then flying off across her shoulders. And it was gorgeous. And she did it all herself, and it took her about 3 years to finish. And it was glorious. It was her entire back, and it started like at the very base of her spine in the grass and went all the way up into a tree and exploded into butterflies all the way across. The whole thing, I mean, that thing it weighed a bunch, but it was so pretty.
It was worth it. Oh my goodness.
So pretty.
Now she probably did she do it straight on, or did she do it in an applique?
She said she did it in an applique. And the nice thing about appliques is they can be unapplied, reapplied. So if, you get too big or too small for whatever piece you have applied it to, or it just gets old and it starts to fall apart. Regalia can be very difficult to wash with all of the pieces parts to it, and all of the appliques and all of the fringes. They're not necessarily washing machine safe.
Nope.
So the nice thing about appliques is that depending on how you apply them, I know a lot of people who make their applique, put it on like a leather back and then have buttons or snaps. Which allows them to be removed so the garment itself can be washed. Which is something I always recommend, is make a removable applique instead of directly beading onto the garment. It makes it easier to clean.
It also makes it easier to bead, I would assume.
Yes.
And then if you bead it first and then try to assemble the garment, that's hard.
Right.
Or if you assemble the garment and then try to bead it, that's really hard. If it's just an applique.
Just bite the bullet, make it an applique, make it a removable one.
Yeah, that's wisdom.
Start your projects ahead of time.
Make it removable.
Make it removable.
Teaching the real stuff today.
Don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect.
Oh yeah.
You can always, if you don't like all of the white space around a design and you don't want to really super hyper carefully trim around it, you can kind of block out like a bigger space and use, like, I'm a big fan of like clear beads. or like a neutral color, like a white, or for this, I'm going to use the blue for the background. Just bead yourself in a circle of sky for your applique, and then you don't have to try and cut all of the little nooks and crannies and hopefully not like snip a stitch off.
Yeah.
Is there a motif that you do often that comes up for you the most?
The most of what I do a lot of beaded lanyards because I like to do the spirals. But when I'm doing flat bead work, I do a lot of berries. I do a lot of flowers for myself. This is part of a cuff set for my regalia that I'm working on. I'm making myself new cuffs. So this is going to be the blackberries. I'm going to have some flowers in it and a blue sky around it, and that will go around my wrists.
How big is that design going to be? I mean, are you going to keep that one to about, what, 3 inches diameter maybe, with the blue beads around it?
So the cuffs are a little bit wider.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can see, but I have it marked on the inside of my hoop.
I can't see, but
that's something I also like to do, is I like to measure the width that I want and then measure that out on the hoop and make different little marks. I have little like notches chiseled into the side of this. Into the side of my hoop, so I can measure it so that I don't then bead above or below that line for something that needs to be a specific width. You can also mark it with like duct tape or markers, or you can directly like mark your cloth. If you have like a chalk line, if that works for you, or Sharpie, fabric pencil. You can do that too. Some people who are very gutsy like to actually cut their fabric before they bead it to the width and then have the strip across their hoop and just have like open air gaps. I would rather just draw the line.
Yeah, they are braver than I. No.
braver men than I. Have attempted this. I think it is better to err on the side of caution and just draw the line. And if it ends up a little narrower or a little wider than what you were expecting, oh well.
Oh well, yeah.
You could go back and seam rip everything, but
that doesn't sound like a good day.
That's not a fun day, no.
You can also, if it's too big or too small for what you want, you can also really impress your local nobility by giving it as largesse. Many a mistake has been given to my friends and loved ones as have a present. Hey, I can't use it. This is now someone else's problem. If I keep a small basket full of the oops, this isn't necessarily SCA usable for me as someone who knows the styles. I keep my little basket and is starting to get full over this pandemic. So I will have lots of gifts to give to visiting nobility when we start to visit people again.
Visiting nobility, chefs at the feast, musicians.
It's great largesse, and you can make lots of little things. Keychains are really easy to make. you know, I can knock out a keychain in like 15, 20 minutes. And, you know, you can give that as largesse. I've found that people with pointy hats are ecstatic when they get shiny things.
Who doesn't like shiny things?
I mean, the SCA is full of crows.
Yeah. Crows and ravens. Shiny.
We're about 9 minutes from the half hour, so.
Are there any other questions?
I don't know a lot or really anything about it, but I know that like loom beading is a thing. How different is that from sort of working on fabric or applique base? And do you do it?
I do not loom bead. It is not something I can coax my fingers into doing. It is a lot stiffer than this. Is a very kind of like soft. This is a cotton fabric here that I'm beading on. Loom beading is a lot more rigid, I've found. It makes beautiful designs, and I have great reverence for everyone who is capable of doing it, but it is not something I have been able to work my skills around, and that's okay.
I have one. I just haven't tried it yet. My sister did it when I was a wee thing, and I saw what can be done, but it still intimidates me.
The loom beading?
Yeah.
I used to do it when I was a kid, and it's a little weird at first, but I miss it. I feel like I should see if my mom still has some of my stuff.
And there's, you know, if that's something you want to learn, there's 1,000,001 tutorials of it on the internet.
Sure.
It's just not something that I personally do. So I will avoid giving a lot of information about it because it's not my skill.
And that's fair. But since I mostly do embroidery and cross stitch, I think your method will be much more comfortable transition for me.
Yeah.
That's just me. I don't know about any of y'all.
I moved from embroidery into beading because I had some friends that wanted me to embroider to bead over some of my embroidery for them. Which is if you want like a raised textured kind of beaded piece, I recommend beading over something that's been embroidered. The really nice thing about that is they make really great like stim toys for small kids or people with autism like myself, because you have the small flat beady texture and then you have the bumpy beady texture, and that's also very fun. So I have been known to sit in court and just texture stim on beadwork.
So how does the beading on top of embroidery work? Like, does it just sit on top of the stitch, or is it kind of integrated into the design?
So you want a really tight stitch on your underneath embroidery, because then you're going to stitch your beads directly on top of that thread. So like if this was a piece of embroidery floss here, I would stitch my beads directly on top of it, going across. So it has that kind of like hill almost.
That sounds awesome, and also a fantastic recipe for like snarls every 3 minutes.
Yes. That is why, again, short threads. You will spend more time threading needles, but less time getting tangled. also don't try and rush. Start long before it's needed.
I've become very dependent upon my needle minder. Have you tried one with your beading?
So I've just kind of developed I like to leave some extra on the edge of my hoop. I just leave it attached to the string and then attach it to the ends. Needle minders are great if you don't lose the needle minder.
I think that's why so many people have a large collection of needle minders, so one for every project.
Yes.
And then some.
I have a few, and they are excellent when I can find them. But I have that wonderful condition of I've put it down, I'm not looking at it, it does not exist.
For anybody who doesn't know what a needle minder is, it's a little magnet that goes on your work that your needle is attached, that it is attracted to. And it's take it off. It's usually decorative.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My little babushka.
Example.
Yes. My little babushka, and she has a magnet. Here, let me take the. Let me be safe and tuck the needle the old-fashioned way first. But on the back, you can see the little disc. That's the other magnet that holds the needle minder. So you have the fabric in between the two magnets, and that magnet will grab hold of your needle, or if you're using pins at all, while you're stitching. And if you're like me, and occasionally and on Lasix, and the bathroom calls hard and fast, you can just toss the needle in the direction of the needle minder and not worry about it as you toss the project aside.
It's a wonderful thing, if that's something you can easily find. I also have that wonderful magic of let me put this where I'll find it, and wishes forever.
Yes.
But I do want to be respectful of people's time. We are almost at the end of our class. So I would like to thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you.
One last option for any pressing emergency questions that people have. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you for teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.